Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Clarion River Brewing here in Clarion, Pennsylvania. It's time for the second edition of our Chris Weibel Coaches Show. I am Sean Fagan, Sports Information Director at Clarion University, and I am joined, of course, by head football coach Chris Weibel. Coach, having this coaches show at our normally scheduled time, it's not often that you move the first show of the year to a different time, but we had to do that last week because of the heat. But now everything is right as rain, as it were.
Yeah, it's pretty cool out there now, so we didn't have to move practice today.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the number one things for a coach is you want to stay on that schedule. That schedule is everything. It's your Bible, right?
It is, and it just makes it easier for the athletes. They're busy with classes as well, so if we can hold them to a strict schedule, without change, they seem to be able to handle it a little better.
Good habits, good routine, all those things feed off on one another, and that's what makes, hopefully, better football players as a result. Folks, you may be watching this live in the barroom. If that is the case, I say welcome to you. You may also be watching it on the Clarion Golden Eagle Vision app that's available on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV, or you may be watching it directly on your computer at Stretch Internet. Whatever the case may be, thank you for joining us here this evening. Coach, you're coming off of your first win of the season, actually your first road win since 2016, and the 400th win in program history.
Correct.
A 30-21 victory over Lock Haven. And I texted you after the game. I haven't seen a game quite like that in some time. The weather really contributed to a wild contest.
It did, I've been watching the weather all week, and you do that as a coach, to try to prepare for Saturday. And at first the rain wasn't supposed to come till later in the day, and then when we arrived, it was started to sprinkle, and I'm like, came a little early. So, we talked about it beforehand about, holding on to the football, protecting the football, and then also on the other side, the defense, getting the football off of Lock Haven. So it was a back and forth day of turnovers, and I've never been involved in a game as a player or a coach with that many turnovers, but luckily we had a few more turnovers than they did, and we were able to win the game.
You absolutely said it. Turnovers told the story of that game. You forced 7 defensively and 1 on offense. We'll get to that one in a little bit. And it seemed from watching that game that the first team to clean up the turnover problem was going to be the team that was going to come out on top because both teams were giving it away early in that one.
Right, yeah. And again, the first half was probably a little more rainy than the second. Started slowing up in the second half. And I think I always, in a rain game, I always submit more balls at the beginning of the game than I have to, because as long as you submit them, they'll use them. So if you just only submit 4 balls and they use 4 balls in the first half, and it's rainy and then it stops, you're using waterlogged balls the second half. So you got to think about that. And I turned in 8 balls to make sure I had enough in the second half. If it stopped or slowed up a little bit, we'd have some dry balls, and I think that helped us.
Now, you're a guy that played here at Clarion. As you know, the weather here is not always very forgiving. And I think it's obvious that, if you have a wet football, it's going to be slick and harder to catch. But what are the other challenges that come with if you're a quarterback playing in that sort of weather, or any sort of player, in terms of ball security or even some things that maybe fans wouldn't think about necessarily?
It's just, as a quarterback, you teach the quarterbacks to hold the ball differently in the wet weather, more of their palm on the ball. Which helps control it a little bit better, but it changes your technique. It drops your elbow a little bit, so you have to actually throw differently. So that's something that probably not a lot of people know. But blind shots, getting tackled from the side when you don't see somebody coming, is when that happens on rain games. It's if you see them coming, they at least can secure the football. When you don't see them coming, it's more a little bit loose, and that's when it happens.
Coach, Lock Haven swapped QBs quite a bit in the first half and more or less settled on Ethan Persa at some point. We talked last week about how they were likely going to be without their starting quarterback. They started the season at quarterback. So with Cameron Tobias and Ethan Persa being 2 different style quarterbacks, how much did that affect your preparation or game plan, or were you prepared for anybody they might throw out there?
We were prepared for, a quarterback run type offense, just because that's what they do. And no matter who was in there, they do a little bit of it. And it's just a matter of fact of who do they hand it off, or does the quarterback run it? Now, the quarterbacks didn't run it as much as they would have with their starter if he would have been in there. but we still had to prepare for it. So we knew there was going to be some of that happening, and they were successful with it. And we had to adjust a little bit to try to stop it. But I think again, being a rain game, their running attack helped them out a lot.
This is a game that started out 14-0 in favor of the Golden Eagles, but then in the blink of an eye, in the second quarter, Lock Haven comes back, ties it up at 14. You go into that halftime break, maybe having seeded some of that momentum. What did you tell the team going into that break?
I just reiterated what I said beforehand. I said, see, I told you it was going to be about turnovers. It's going to be about the weather, and we have to focus, and take care of the football, and so I just kind of went back to what we talked about beforehand, and they kind of said, yeah, you're right, so, we just come out and we secured a little better, it was, at that point, to me, it's a 0-0 ball game, and, our statistics were pretty much similar, almost equal at halftime, so it was a 0-0 game to me, we had to come out and get it done again.
Coach, you came out and you really got the dream scenario in a lot of ways after the halftime break. You got the ball after halftime. You scored on that drive. You forced a turnover on the next offensive possession for Lock Haven, and then you followed that up with another scoring drive. Talk about a team that took the message to heart in the locker room.
They did, and obviously we made a change, and I know we'll talk about that at quarterback, coming out to try to get a spark, and when that's what you do when you're stalling, you try to come up with ways we can get a spark going. We did that, and they come out and they responded, and they did respond to what we talked about at halftime, and we come out and again, we scored, we got a turnover, we scored again, and that's a good way to start the second half, and and throughout the rest of the game.
And it was still a close game throughout. Lock Haven responds with a one-play, 71-yard touchdown drive on a long pass to make it 23-21. Now, you had a quick hitter like that in the previous week against Shippensburg. What does that do to the psyche of a team? I guess if you're a team that's mentally tough, you can weather that, but that's got to be a difficult play to stomach. What happened in that play?
It was more of like a swing pass. It was kind of set up as a swing pass, and pretty much everybody blocks. It's something we weren't ready for, and they got some really good blocks downfield, and then the receiver, the running back, he made some nice cuts and scored, so it's something that it does, it's you go up, and then you get a big play against you. It does. You're like, it does hurt your psyche a little bit, but we got to I always talk about, short-term memory, and make sure if we do get a big play against us, forget about it. The most important play is the next one.
And the next drive that you did have was very important. It was a long, time-consuming, a 10-play drive. That's a coach's dream, especially in a close game.
Right.
Malik McGriff punches it in from 5 yards out, and then your defense gets two huge stops down the stretch. There's so much to build on with a game like that where I think where the defense struggled for consistency throughout, but then at the moment of the game it was most important, they stepped up and really delivered.
They did, and that's what it is. It's a team effort, and I think it was a good team win. We need to be more consistent on both sides of the ball throughout 60 minutes, and that's going to be the key. The good thing is we got the win, but we also got a lot of learning opportunities that we can get better from that game. So that's other than the win, that's the next best thing that came out of it.
And the best way to have to deal with those learning scenarios is obviously coming after a win. The message seems to ring a little bit truer after that. Coach, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the individual performers in that game against the Bald Eagles. Keep on watching on Clarion, Golden Eagle Vision, and Stretch Internet. Welcome back to the Chris Weibel Show. Sean Fagan joined by head football coach Chris Weibel. Coach, a lot of big performers, a lot of them on the defense, as you can imagine, whenever you take the ball away 7 times.
Right.
But, we'll focus on a couple of them. The guy that got all the headlines this week was Sam Ferrari. He was the PSAC West Defensive Athlete of the Week. He had 2 interceptions. He had a forced fumble. He is always around the ball.
Right.
And that's something that we've seen from him throughout his career. He's forced a lot of turnovers. It always seems that Sam factors in.
He does. He's very smart. That's the good thing about Sam is, he puts himself in the right places, and he really studies film. He knows what offenses are trying to do against us. So, again, he's always in the right spot, and that's why he gets a lot of interceptions.
He's not traditionally the fastest or most athletic guy, but as you said, when you have such a knowledge of the defense, you have a knowledge of the opposing offense, you can play faster because you know where you're going to go and you don't have to slow down. You're not fooled very often.
Right. Again, he studies the offenses really well, throughout the week. They watch film every day, and I know he watches more than he's supposed to watch, but again, he puts himself in the right places, and you don't have to be the biggest, the fastest, the strongest to do that. You just have to be in the right place.
Let's talk about that a little bit, a little sidebar here. One of the great things about technology in the modern day is that it used to be if a player wanted to go watch film, they had to come to somebody's office. You had to set the projector up. You had to, find, a reel, all that stuff. But now all of these guys have access to film 24/7, and as the coaches probably like, you have the ability to find out when they're watching it.
We do. We can tell how long they've been on, when they've been on. A lot of them watch it on their phones, but they're still, they're still supposed to come in the office and watch it. And then they also watch it in meetings with their position coaches. So they get a lot of film. It's nobody's fault but their own if they don't know what's going on, because we make sure, again, they have access whenever they want it through our video system online. So it's a lot easier now than it was when I played, I guess.
Yeah. Let's talk about another defensive back, another guy with 2 interceptions, and he's a guy that's playing defense for the first year in college. But Dorian Johnson, a cornerback, he had 2 interceptions, including the backbreaker at the end of that game, picked off that pass that halted the last real threat for Lock Haven. He's a guy that came in last year as defensive back, played some offense to give you a spark on offense, and now he's back in his natural position on defense, and he looks fantastic.
He does, and again, talk about another smart football player. And last year we needed a spark on offensive side, and he's a good athlete, and I knew he could return punts, so we said, hey, you want to play some wide receiver? And he said, sure. So he did some nice things there, but he is a cornerback. That's his natural position, and you can see that in 2 games where he can match up against anybody right now, and he even when he does have catches made on him, he's right where he needs to be. The other team just maybe make a play. So he's done a good job. Looking forward to seeing how much better he can get.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. He was on Eubanks from Shippensburg in that first week. Was he on there?
He was.
Even on
I
the
believe
touchdown.
And then the one-handed cut. Yeah, that was him. But he was blanketed coverage.
Sure.
But again, good receivers are going to make plays no matter how covered they are.
Yeah, and absolutely. And like you said, in good position in each of those times. And he already has 5 passes defended and 2 interceptions. We've played 2 games already this year. 2 other guys that have stepped up. Gus Schmidt, he's been a contributor over the last couple years here. He had an interception against Lock Haven. And then Paul Blendinger, who came into the game against Shippensburg initially when Hakeem McKenzie was hurt. And we've seen a lot out of Paul. He seems like a guy that, the same thing, maximum effort, tries to get himself in the right spot at the right time.
Right.
And, doesn't always get there, but at the same time, you can't be mad at a guy with that kind of effort and that kind of how, as it were.
Effort, and Paul's not afraid to hit anybody. That's the thing I like about him, and we don't have a lot of guys on the team that are afraid to hit anybody, and that's a good thing. But Paul's not afraid to step in there and, plug a hole. It's just more of where to go, and he's getting better with that. Again, I watched him in practice today. He plugged a hole and plugged it pretty well. So I think he's just going to get better the more he plays. On Saturdays, he's just going to get better and better and better.
Overall, as a defense, you're still looking for that full 60-minute performance. You had a better first half against Shippensburg. In some ways, it was kind of sporadic, thrown in there against Lock Haven. But you're looking for that full, complete effort against a solid opponent. and they're going to have a couple cracks at the chance to do that coming up.
Yeah, if you go back and look at the Shippensburg game, they didn't get much rest. Sure. And, the offense didn't help them out, so we couldn't sustain drives, which kept them off the field, kept them fresh. And totally different in the Lock Haven game where, heck, you never know when the next turnover is going to be. So, they were out pretty fast. But then again, we did have a couple nice long drives, or they turned the ball back over. So they weren't out there very long, so they were a little more fresh, but it was just a little more sporadic because of the turnovers.
Let's look at the offense a little bit. You alluded to this earlier at halftime of the game against Lock Haven. Javante Seard entered the game at quarterback in relief, and he was very effective in managing the game from the rest of that point.
Right.
As I said in the preamble, the game that was going to clean up the turnovers was the team that was probably going to come out on top, and he did a good job of doing that.
He did. He came in, he's excited to go, and, he brought a little bit more excitement to the offense, saying, hey, let's go, let's get it going. He managed the game really well. I think one pass that we ended up getting it back. It was a pick and then we fumble. It was a pick. Should have been a pick, but it was hit before it was completed.
Right.
I think that's the way they called it. But that was, he was pressured. His arm got hit, so he does a good job protecting the football, and not putting himself, or the ball in jeopardy, which is a good thing when you need to manage a football game and you got the lead and you need to get out of there with the win.
And another guy that had a very good game, maybe a little strong to call it a coming out party, but Marcus McCoy, we've talked about him 3 weeks in a row now at different coaches' shows. And he's a guy that he had 2 touchdown catches on Saturday. He only had 1 in his career coming into that game.
Right.
He's a big, strong guy, not a real burner, but he's a guy that can win a jump ball.
He can, and I think you look back at the Shippensburg game, he was real close to having 1 there, and then 2 this past week, and he dove and had his fingertips on another one, so he probably could have had 3 of them. He's a big kid. He's strong. He blocks well. He runs good routes. He might not be the fastest, but again, he can use his body and his football smarts to get open. And he does. And if the ball's put anywhere near him, he'll go up and get it.
All right, Coach, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the matchup coming up this Saturday when the Golden Eagles open at home against the Lincoln Lions. You're watching on Stretch Internet and the Clarion Golden Eagle Vision app. Welcome back to the Chris Weibel Show. Sean Fagan joined by Clarion head football coach Chris Weibel. It's the true home opener this week, Coach. You're taking on the Lincoln Lions. It's the first time you've played them in your program's history, and the home opener is always a special day.
It is. It's the day where, we can showcase what we have, and that's what I told the guys today. Home openers are special. You're going to have butterflies. You're going to be a little bit nervous. The campus community, the town community are going to be there to see how Clarion football is going to be this year, and they judge it all in that first game. So it's exciting, and I keep trying to tell these guys, to be ready for it, be prepared for it, because come Saturday and home opener, there's going to be a lot of excitement.
What do you remember about the first time you played in front of the home fans?
I think the first time I played, I called the wrong play at the line and went the wrong way. So it took me a few plays to settle in, but when I did, had a lot of fun.
Well, Lincoln is a team that, to be frank, has struggled a little bit this year. They started the season against Fayetteville State, and then last week they played against Division I FCS Central Connecticut State. You've been on the wrong end of that FCS opponent non-conference game as well.
Right.
But you also know that that's a team that is going to be hungry because they've been licking their wounds all week, and now they're ready to attack again.
Absolutely. They want to win just as much as we do.
Sure.
And that's, again, what I keep telling the guys and the team is they're not driving 5.5 hours to lose a football game. Just like I wouldn't expect to do that as well. So, again, just trying to prepare. I know they have a new coaching staff this year that's very reputable, have a lot of experience in coaching. So they have good athletes. They're big at certain positions. They just have to click, and then they played a couple really good opponents, but they did a lot of good things. So I keep trying to make sure the guys understand that this isn't a walk in the park. We have to be prepared for it, and we have to be ready to go.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're a team that offensively, they really want to throw the ball. They'll run to keep you honest, but really they want to get up and down the field throwing the football. Is that accurate?
Yeah, they kind of do a little bit of both. They do throw a lot. I guess it all depends. They've played 2 quarterbacks in the first 2 games, and one guy's probably more of a passer. The other guy can throw the ball as well, but he can also run the ball really well. He's very elusive. He's very athletic. And when he wants to throw the ball and he's on target, he can sling it. So, they have some weapons. We have to make sure we're prepared.
All right, Coach, that's going to do it for us this week on the Chris Weibel Coaches Show. I want to thank Brian Smith and Clarion River Brewing for allowing us to take over the back room for another week of the Coaches Show. I want to thank Brandon Schlick, who is producing and manning the camera this evening. I want to thank you, Coach Weibel, for taking time out of your
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and we'll see you again next week at 7 o'clock here at Clarion River Brewing. You can join us again online on Stretch Internet or the Clarion Golden Eagle Vision app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or Android TV, or on the PSAC network. Once again, for Chris Weibel, I'm Sean Fagan saying thank you so much for joining us. Have a good evening.